proud of the daughter who upholds family values. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to tremble, my heart pounding, as if I'd been ambushed. I set the phone down on the vanity, trying to take a deep breath. But the comments started flashing through my mind like familiar arrows. Well done, at least one of the two knows how to behave. Aunt Carol. Claire's always been a challenge. Uncle Stephen. Hailey's the role model. Claire, hard to say. Grandma. Hard to say. Or did they never want to say the truth? I'm Claire Martin, 32 years old, an independent architect living in Portland, Oregon. I work hard, have been self-sufficient since 21, and today is the day I marry the only man who ever saw me as something right in his life. Ethan Walton, a calm, honest, unreasonably patient civil engineer. We met 2 years ago through a community project, and from the start I knew he was the only one who could build a home with me, not with materials, but with trust. And because of that, I dreamed today would be the best day of my life. Until that post. Claire. A soft knock at the door. Jasmine's voice. Come in, I said, my voice hoarse. Jasmine, my best friend from college, stepped in wearing a burgundy bridesmaid dress. Her face hardened the moment she saw mine. What did they do this time? She asked, almost whispering. I handed her the phone. She read silent, then gritted her teeth. Today. They really can't stop, can they? I didn't answer. I was trying not to cry. Claire, look at me. Jasmine grabbed my shoulders. I know this hurts. I know you wanted them here. But you don't need them. They chose not to come. They'll miss you in this stunning wedding dress. They won't see Ethan looking at you like you're the only person in the world. I swallowed hard, nodding slightly. But inside, everything was crumbling. I thought, despite their harshness, despite me not being like Hailey, the sweet, traditional, perfect daughter they'd show up for this big day, they'd set aside their biases, their expectations, and just be parents. I was wrong. I stood looking at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was both resilient and exhausted. She'd spent her youth trying to be good enough for people who were never satisfied. She'd hoped just once to be chosen, but she didn't need to be chosen anymore. The church was a 10-minute drive away. My hometown Albany was quiet this autumn morning. Golden leaves scattered the paths, the air crisp. But inside me a storm raged. Jasmine sat beside me in the car, holding my hand tightly. Claire, remember? This is your day, not theirs. They chose to abandon you. You don't have to do that to yourself. Ethan was waiting at the altar. I could picture his eyes when he saw me, always full of love, never judgment. He once said, I love you, not because you're perfect, but because you dare to be yourself. And maybe today I'd finally understand that. When the church doors opened, I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The music swelled gently. Step by step, I walked toward Ethan. His eyes met mine, and just as Jasmine said, I felt like the center of a small universe. I tried not to look at the front row, where 2 empty chairs meant for my parents stood starkly visible. Every bride hopes for someone to walk her down the aisle. I didn't have that. But I had myself, and I had Ethan. The ceremony was like a dream. We said our vows, exchanged rings. Ethan kissed my forehead after we were pronounced husband and wife. The crowd clapped. Jasmine cried. Ethan's family embraced me like their own daughter. And for a moment I let myself believe I could still have a family. The reception was filled with laughter. I smiled, and every photo danced the first dance with Ethan under soft golden lights. But in my heart, those 2 empty chairs lingered, impossible to erase. Some wounds don't bleed, but still make your heart ache with every breath. As the night deepened, I stood alone by the reception hall window, watching people dance. Jasmine came over, standing quietly for a moment. You okay? She asked. I didn't answer right away, then nodded gently. Not okay, but I will be. And for the first time in my life, I said that without lying to myself. On the way back to our apartment, Ethan and I sat in silence. He held my hand, occasionally glancing over as if to ask but not press. When we got home, I changed out of my wedding dress, put the pearl necklace back in its box. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened my phone. A message from Hailey. Mom says you're selfish. You didn't attend the charity event and you didn't invite enough relatives. They're really disappointed. I gave a small laugh. Disappointed. That was never new to me. I turned to Ethan. I have something to tell you. And then I started talking. About the mortgage debt. About the $72,000. About how my parents could lose their house. Ethan froze, but he didn't say anything, just quietly placed his hand on mine. I opened the banking app. The automatic payment was still there. 1 week until the next due date. I stared at the cancel payment button. Then I pressed it. What did you just do? Ethan asked softly. I looked at him, my eyes no longer hesitant. I just chose myself. There's a letter from the bank. Ethan said, his voice carrying from the kitchen as I sat dazed by the window, looking out at Portland's misty morning. I didn't respond right away. Something tightened in my chest, a familiar, vague premonition, as if the past was knocking just hours after I'd stepped into a new chapter of my life. Claire Ethan called again, holding a stack of mail, including an envelope with the familiar logo, First Federal Mortgage Services. I stood walking slowly toward him. Seeing my name, Claire Martin, on the envelope, not Greg or Patricia Martin, I knew. The time had come. Ethan handed me the letter, his eyes not leaving my face. Why are they sending your mail here? Are you tied to this loan? I sat down, my fingers trembling slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was confirmation of the latest payment, $3,000, processed successfully, as it had been every month for the past 24 months. No more avoiding it. Ethan, I began, my voice hoarse. I need to tell you something. He sat beside me, placing his hand on mine, waiting, no pressure, no judgment. Just a steady presence. 2 years ago, I said, staring into the distance, my dad lost his pension in a scam investment. Mom hid it. They were about to lose the house. I found out through a conversation they didn't know I overheard. They were panicked, afraid of losing face. Ethan didn't react, just held my hand tighter. I paid for them. $3,000 a month. They didn't know. I set it up through a secondary account, automatic payments. They thought it was a debt restructure, a bank loyalty policy. I didn't correct them. Ethan exhaled slowly. And you did this for 2 years without telling anyone. I nodded. I thought if I was good enough, if I sacrificed enough, they'd love me, or at least respect me. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. But yesterday, sitting alone in front of the mirror with 2 empty chairs in the church and seeing Mom post about Hailey like she's a medal, I realized I'd been lying to myself all along. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he asked gently, So, what now? I stood, went to my desk, and opened my laptop. I logged into the banking system, scrolled to the automatic payments. The history showed 24 consistent transactions, never late. $72,000. My finger hovered over the cancel payment button. They didn't show up yesterday, I said, eyes fixed on the screen. They don't need me. Just my money. I'm not doing this anymore. I clicked. The automatic payment disappeared. I scrolled to the account notes section. For 2 years it had been blank. I started typing. Funding provided by the difficult daughter. I saved it. It felt like a scar being stitched closed. Ethan stepped behind me, resting his hands lightly on my shoulders. You sure I'm not the daughter trying to be loved anymore? I'm the woman who chose to love herself. I spent that morning sorting through old documents, payment receipts, email printouts, bank statements. I organized them into a neat file. I picked a wedding photo, me and Ethan, in the moment he laughed at me under the dance floor lights, his eyes full of pride and love. Then I printed my mother's Instagram post, circling the line, proud of the daughter who upholds family values. Beside it, I wrote by hand, What are family values? Mom. Finally, I wrote a letter. Dear Mom and Dad, this is probably the one thing I've never said to you, and today I'm writing it to ensure I'm no longer silent. For the past 2 years, the house you've lived in securely wasn't thanks to a bank favor. It wasn't a restructuring policy. It was me. Every month, I sent $3,000, not a cent less, not a day late. A total of $72,000. I didn't say anything, not out of fear, but out of hope. I thought if I helped, if I stayed in the background, without asking for anything, one day you'd turn around and see me. But I was wrong. Yesterday, when you chose not to attend my wedding, when you posted praising Hailey as a way to silently disown me, I understood my kindness was never enough. And the worst part is, you never wanted it. I'm not that naive Claire anymore. I'm the woman who survived your silence and indifference, and now I won't keep saving people who never wanted to save themselves. The final payment has stopped. The bank will notify you, and in the notes they'll read what I should have said long ago: funding provided by the difficult daughter. Goodbye. Claire. I placed the letter, the printed post, the wedding photo, and the financial file into a large envelope, sealed it, addressed it, Greg and Patricia, Martin, Albany, OR. I drove to the post office myself, sent it via certified mail. When I signed for it, it felt like signing a release. That afternoon I sat with Ethan on our apartment balcony sipping tea. The autumn breeze brushed my cheek. Ethan ran his fingers through my hair, silent, just there. "How do you feel?" he asked after a long pause. "Free. And a little sad," I replied. Not because I stopped helping them, but because I once thought, if I loved enough, I'd be loved back. He squeezed my hand. Sometimes people need to stop to know their limits. I nodded. That night I dreamed I stood in front of the old Albany house empty-handed, watching my parents close the door in my face. But this time I didn't cry. I turned away. With every step I took from that house, the sky grew brighter. The next morning, as I finished brewing coffee, the phone rang. An unknown number, a lawyer's office representing the bank. We're confirming the cancellation of the payment and the new note on the account. Is it correct that you wish to cease funding the loan for Mr. Greg Martin? I answered calmly. Yes, and I don't want further contact regarding that loan. I hung up. Ethan stood at the counter, raising an eyebrow in a wordless question. I just smiled, handing him a coffee. They know now. Ethan grinned, but his eyes held concern. How will they react, you think? I shrugged. They'll probably be furious, feel betrayed. They're used to living in delusion. But this time they'll have to face reality. I opened my laptop. My inbox lit up a message from Hailey. Subject, what did you just do? I exhaled, not opening it. No rush. I once thought when I stopped everything else would too. That my silence was the thread holding a rotting family together. But it turns out when I let go, the cracks started showing layer by layer, and the truth, the one I'd swallowed for years, was now finding its way out piece by piece. Aunt Catherine called me on a Saturday morning while I was brewing coffee, still half asleep. Her voice was gentle, but taut, like a violin string. Claire, I'm sorry I didn't call sooner, but can you meet me? It's urgent. We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Salem, halfway between her place and my Portland apartment. I arrived 10 minutes early, chose a secluded corner table, and ordered chamomile tea as usual. A light rain fell pattering evenly on the glass roof, creating an odd hollow sound, like a warning of something about to collapse. Catherine walked in, draped in a long coat, her face paler than I remembered. She was my mother's younger sister, completely different in demeanor and lifestyle. Quiet, often passively agreeing with her sister's decisions. But this time she looked me straight in the eye. No beating around the bush. Claire. Did you know Brendan pawned Grandma's pearl necklace? I froze. That necklace, I still remember it clearly. Grandma wore it in her 1958 wedding photo. She kept it carefully her whole life, saying it would go to the granddaughter who upheld its value. When she passed, Mom said it was given to Hailey because it suited her style better. I didn't argue, just smiled as I always did when excluded from tradition. I saw Brendan at Murphy's pawn shop right in downtown Salem. A month ago. I thought I was mistaken. But yesterday I saw that necklace again. It's definitely the one. My throat went dry. You're sure I have a photo? Catherine said, showing me her phone. In it was Brendan wearing a baseball cap, holding a green velvet box, his face expressionless. Claire, there's more, she continued, her voice lower. An old friend of mine at the bank called yesterday. Brendan tried to borrow $50,000 against your parents' house. He forged Greg's signature, but the application was rejected because the house is already on the foreclosure list. I sat still. The pieces started falling into place in my mind like a warped puzzle, Hailey flaunting her perfect life. My mother praising her successful son-in-law. Their pride in smart financial decisions, while Brendan pawned family heirlooms and secretly tried to claim ownership of my parents' house. The sense of grievance turned into something sharp cold. No longer pain, but clarity. I left the cafe with a clear decision. That evening in our small apartment, I printed my mother's Instagram post. Again, the photo of Hailey in a pale yellow dress beaming with the caption, "Family is everything," in bold. I framed it next to a copy of the foreclosure notice. In the corner, I wrote in red ink, "Maybe family needs a new definition." I put it all in a new envelope along with a wedding photo of me and Ethan, this time, the one where we're both laughing during our first dance. I wanted them to see what they missed when they chose not to come. I sent the package to the old Albany address. Certified mail signature required. 3 days later, social media started buzzing. The first photo was posted by a neighbor foreclosure notice taped to the Martins' glass door marked "Final Notice of Foreclosure." The poster, an account named Georgia W47, captioned it, "Sad, I thought they were loaded." I wasn't in Albany's community Facebook group, but Jasmine was. She sent me a screenshot with a message. "This is about to blow up." Comments piled up by the minute. Some gloated, some expressed pity. Many questioned, didn't they just throw an engagement party for their daughter? Hailey's mom posted about Napa Valley last week, didn't she? Then, predictably, Patricia responded. Her post began with, "We're addressing a technical issue with the bank," and ended with the familiar, "My family always puts values first." No apology. No mention of Claire. No reference to Brendan. Just a clumsy cover-up. Then Hailey called. I was at the office when the phone rang. Seeing her name on the screen, I hesitated for a few seconds, but I picked up. "Claire," her voice was small like a breeze. "Are you free? I need to talk." "Privately." I sighed. "What about, you know something, don't you? About Brendan. I've noticed things. He's been hiding papers, dodging calls. Yesterday, when I confronted him, he got angry, and he accidentally smashed my phone." My throat tightened. Despite all my anger toward her, hearing the tremble in her voice, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. Where I asked. "Blue Fern, this afternoon, 3 o'clock. Please don't say no, Claire. I don't know who to trust anymore." I nodded, though she couldn't see. 3. Don't be late. When I hung up, I sat still for a moment. There were things I'd wanted to say to Hailey for years. Questions I'd held for over a decade. Why were you always chosen? Why was I always the shadow? Why did you never see me as a partner, only a rival? But this afternoon, I wouldn't go to accuse. I'd go to tell the truth, to lay it all out, once and for all. I opened my drawer, pulling out copies of what Catherine gave me, Brendan's photo at the pawn shop, the shop's name, the date and time, and the bank's confirmation of the rejected loan application due to the house's foreclosure status. I packed them in my bag, preparing for a tough meeting. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves scattered on the pavement. I looked in the mirror, tied my hair up, applied light lipstick. This wouldn't be a sisterly chat anymore. This was a confrontation between truth and the illusions my family had nurtured for too long. We'd all been living in a scripted farce for years. It was time to turn off the stage lights. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. Not because I wanted to seem arrogant, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to walk into a room without apologizing for existing. I wanted them to wait. To sit in the gnawing silence of a family on the verge of collapse. And I wanted them to feel it just as I had for 32 years. My parents' old house in Albany hadn't changed much since my last visit maybe 2 years ago. The wooden door still wore its old paint dust lightly coating the steps. The front garden was more barren, as if it too was weary of being unloved. I walked up and knocked. My mother, Patricia, opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Claire," she whispered, her voice catching. "Hi, Mom," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Shall we start?" She stepped back, letting me in. The living room was unchanged. Family photos lined the walls, but I was in only a few, always at the edge, always faded. Hailey, meanwhile, was everywhere, radiant, like a trophy. My father, Greg, sat in the middle of the sofa, arms crossed, his face stern. Hailey sat beside him, her eyes red. Brendan wasn't there. I didn't ask why. I guessed she'd finally pushed him out of the family portrait they'd painted for years. I set my file bag on the table, unzipped it gently, and sat in the chair across from them. "Since you wanted to talk, let's talk," I began. My voice wasn't loud, but clear enough to cut through the heavy air. Hailey looked at me as if waiting to see where I'd start. I didn't look at her. I looked at Dad. "I paid $72,000 over the past 2 years to keep this house," I said. $3,000 a month, never short, never late. The statements are all here." I pulled out the papers, sliding them forward right in front of him. Dad looked at the stack, but didn't touch it. "That's impossible." "The bank told me it was restructured." I laughed, soft but sharp. "No, Dad. That's the lie you wanted to believe. This," I held up the statement, "is the truth." Patricia's hands trembled as she picked up a few sheets. Her eyes scanned the numbers, then slowly landed on the final note, funding provided by the difficult daughter. I looked at Mom. "Do you know what that means?" She lowered her head, silent. Greg stayed quiet, his face reddening anger or shame, I couldn't tell. Then Hailey spoke. "Claire, I didn't know. I really didn't know you did all this." I turned to her. "And Brendan," she swallowed. "I found out he's been hiding debts more than I thought. Credit accounts I'd never heard of. And," she paused, taking a breath, "last week he smashed my phone when I asked about the loans. That's when I realized things were worse than I thought." I stayed silent. For the first time I saw something in Hailey beyond pride, fear, maybe genuine. I didn't know Grandma's necklace was pawned. I didn't know he forged Dad's signature. I didn't know— Her voice broke. I looked at Mom. "And you, Mom, you didn't know anything either." Patricia leaned forward. "I know I was wrong, but I didn't know it was this bad. I was too scared. I have a heart condition, Claire, recently diagnosed. Early stage. I didn't want anyone to worry." A chill ran down my spine. For the first time in this meeting, I felt a flicker of pity. But only a flicker. Greg stood abruptly. "This is all because you always want to be the center of attention. You always complicate things. Always the difficult daughter." I stood facing him, unflinching. If being honest is complicated, fine. I'll take being the difficult daughter. But at least I haven't lived off lies. Greg opened his mouth to argue, but said nothing. I looked around the room at each face. Mom tired and helpless. Dad stubborn and prideful. Hailey shaken and scared. Me still standing as I had for years. "I came here to make one thing clear," I said, my voice steady. "I won't keep paying for this house. I've stopped. I've done my part. More than my part. More than anyone acknowledged. Now it's time for you to face reality." I zipped up my bag. "This meeting is over for me. If anyone has something to say it now." I turned to leave when Hailey's voice broke through almost a sob. "Claire, wait." I stopped, not turning. "I'm pregnant." I turned slowly. "I found out last week. I haven't told anyone. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm scared. But if there's one person I want my child to look up to, it's you." I stood frozen. My eyes met my sister, whom I thought would never understand me. "Can you be the godmother?" Hailey asked, her eyes wet. I didn't answer right away. Everything in me shattered: anger, pain, pity, and something like forgiveness. I took a deep breath. "Are you sure?" Hailey nodded. "I'm not worthy, but I want it." I looked at her a few seconds longer, then turned to the door. "I'll think about it," I said, and walked out. Outside, gray clouds loomed. A light rain began to fall. Forgiveness didn't come on a sunny morning with birds chirping outside the window. Forgiveness wasn't a sentimental choice or a romanticized erasure of what was denied. Forgiveness for me was an internal war, relentless quiet, and sometimes more painful than hatred. I thought I'd walk away forever. After that meeting, I believed I could close the door on the past and move on with Ethan with the freedom I'd found. But a month later, here, I was in a brightly lit lawyer's office clutching papers labeled property transfer. Not because I was weak, but because I didn't want 2 old people, however wrong they'd been, to sleep on a park bench in town just because their pride kept them from asking for help. The bank had officially foreclosed on the Albany house 2 weeks ago. I received the notice sent to me, not them, because I was still listed as the payer for the past 2 years, and though I'd canceled the payments, I had one last option: buy the house back under my name. Not an easy decision. All of mine and Ethan's savings, over 130 Sazwalars dollars, would go to reclaim a house that symbolized injustice, not a home. I lost sleep for nights. Ethan knew. He didn't interfere, didn't advise, just stayed by my side, listening patiently. The night before, as I sat quietly on the balcony, he brought me a hot tea. "You don't need to prove anything to them anymore," he said. I shook my head. "It's not about proving. It's about affirming myself." He nodded. "Then I'm with you. Whatever you choose." That morning I went to the bank in Salem. The asset manager, an older woman named Margaret, took me to a private room. She didn't ask much, just handed me the paperwork to buy back the house as an individual with full ownership. I read every line, every clause. My hand only trembled when I signed the final part: sole legal owner, Claire Elizabeth Martin. My parents' house was now mine, legally at least. That afternoon I called Mom. She answered after the third ring. "Claire," her voice was cautious but not as cold as usual. "I need you, Dad, and Hailey at the lawyer's office in Salem tomorrow at 10 a.m. It's important." "What is it?" "The house." I hung up without explaining further. The next morning I arrived early, bringing the lawyer-verified documents: a leaseback contract, a property management agreement, a family ethics clause, a grandiose name I gave it but necessary. When Patricia, Greg, and Hailey walked in, the room seemed to freeze for a few seconds. Mom wore a long, pale gray coat. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes had lost their usual sharpness, softened like early morning light. Hailey followed, no makeup, holding a water bottle, looking anxious. Dad came last, his steps slower than usual. I stood, nodded a greeting, and gestured for them to sit. "In front of you are the documents for the house's ownership." I began, my voice even and clear. "I bought it back. In my name. With all my savings." Mom gasped. Dad sat still. Hailey caught her breath. "You?" "Why?" Mom asked, almost disbelieving. "Because I couldn't look away," I replied. "But this time, I'm not doing it to be loved. I'm doing it because I don't want to carry another moral burden." I handed each of them an agreement. "You can stay in the house, not for free, but not with cash. The price is honesty, respect, and no more lies. Every month I require a spending statement. Any major financial moves need notification. No one can take out loans in another's name." I turned to Hailey. "Brendan is never to set foot in that house." Hailey nodded, her eyes red. He's gone." "I did what you said. I'll sign too." I pulled out a secondary contract godmother agreement. "With legal clauses: if you have the child and can't care for them, the child will be under the godmother's guardianship, per your initial wishes." Hailey gave a tearful smile. "You really thought of everything." "I don't just think anymore," I said. "I do." The room felt heavy as lead. I slid the final paper to Mom, the property management agreement. She stared at it for a long time. "Claire." I looked up. For the first time, her eyes didn't avoid mine. "You're the daughter I love. I wasn't brave enough to say it sooner." My heart tightened, not from emotion, but from a sense of loss. If only those words had been said in a warm room, not under cold legal lights, with a lawyer as witness. Ethan sat beside me, taking my hand. I squeezed his, a silent thank you. I signed. They signed one by one. The contracts were sealed. I pulled a new key from my bag and placed it on the table. The house has been repaired. Security system utilities all upgraded. This is the key. Greg looked at me for once, not reacting. He just nodded quietly. I stood, gathering my papers, zipping my bag. "I don't need thanks," I said before leaving. "I just need you to understand, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness is looking at each other without defenses. And if you can't do that, this is the last time we sit at the same table." I walked out of the room. Outside, a light sun shone, the breeze gently brushing my hair. Ethan followed, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Now what he asked. I looked at him, smiling faintly. "Now, we go home. Our real home." I always remember the scent of my grandmother's dried lavender, lingering in the carefully folded handkerchiefs, in the old tea tin where she hid mint candies just for me, and in the silk, floral pillow on her armchair where I'd rest my head every summer afternoon listening to her stories of the past. And today, exactly 1 year after my wedding without her or my parents, I stood in the backyard of the old house, now renovated to prepare for her memorial. For the first time in years, the family gathered fully, not out of duty, but because of a fragile, sincere thread being rewoven. A gentle breeze rustled through the vibrant maples. On the long wooden table, incense smoke curled from the burner. Grandma's photo sat prominently in front of a bowl of pumpkin ginger soup, her remedy for my colds. Across the yard, Dad was kneeling planting chrysanthemums in the old flower bed. It was Grandma's favorite garden, neglected for years. I noticed he held her old gardening tools, worn wooden handles but carefully cleaned. Mom sat in a wicker chair under the cherry tree. She looked much older, her hair more than half gray, but her eyes were no longer sharp, softened like dawn's light. When I approached, she reached out and took my hand, a gesture absent from my adult memories. "Claire," she said, her voice thin as morning mist. "I know I was wrong. So many things. I should have seen clearly. I should have loved you the right way from the start." I held her hand. The hand that once felt like cold metal pulling me from mistakes now trembled in mine. I didn't speak, just squeezed gently. Hailey stepped out from the house, cradling a tiny baby girl with coal-black eyes. Her 6-month-old daughter Marin, named after Grandma. Hailey was now a single mother. No Brendan, no lies. She worked part-time while studying, never complaining. Thinner, tougher, quieter, as if pain had taught her the language of maturity. "Want to hold her?" Hailey asked, her eyes shining with unspoken gratitude. I took Marin into my arms. She nuzzled my shoulder, her warmth seeping into my heart like a gentle prayer. Ethan stood beside me, his arm around my shoulder. He smiled, seeing me with the tiny child in a scene he never thought possible. "Didn't know you were so good with kids," he whispered. I smiled softly. Neither did I. Maybe because I don't have to prove anything anymore. I'm just being me. Jasmine approached, holding a camera. "Get closer, Claire. You're in the middle." "Everyone, look here." I stood between my parents, Hailey beside me, Ethan on my left. Jasmine snapped the shot just as Marin touched my cheek. The photo captured me smiling, a real smile, unforced, not seeking anyone's approval. We all sat down to eat. I was asked to speak something that had never happened at any family meal before. I stood looking at Grandma's photo. Grandma once told me, "You don't need to be like anyone else. Just be you and live kindly." I didn't fully understand then. But now I know living kindly isn't just doing good, it's standing up for the truth, saying no when needed, and forgiving not because someone deserves it, but because I want peace in my heart. I looked around at each face, people who'd hurt me, made me doubt my worth, but also people who, however slightly, had learned to change. I don't think our family is perfect, and I don't expect it to be anymore. I just hope, from now on, we live honestly with each other. No conditions, no roles, just people, knowing we're not perfect, but choosing to stay. Ethan held my hand under the table. Mom wiped tears. Dad nodded slowly, saying nothing, but his eyes, for the first time, held no doubt toward me. After the ceremony, I lingered in the yard, watching the sunset stretch across the white fence. The sky was pale orange. Golden leaves fell gently, the breeze cool, but soft. Jasmine handed me the camera. "Look at this," she said. "This one's the best." I looked at the screen, me holding Marin Ethan, embracing me from behind, Hailey smiling softly beside me. Mom's hand on my shoulder, Dad planting another chrysanthemum in the garden. A moment that seemed impossible, but so real. "I used to think I had to be perfect to be loved," I said like a whisper to the wind. "Now I know real love starts when I dare to be myself." Jasmine smiled. "And you did it." I tucked the camera away, took Ethan's hand and looked back at the house one last time. No more resentment, no more craving recognition. Just peace, as if after all these years I'd finally come home. Family isn't a place that's always right, but it's where each person learns to face the truth and choose forgiveness. My story isn't a fairy tale, but a journey of growth where I was hurt, let go, and then chose to return, not to mend old cracks, but to build a new foundation with honesty, compassion, and clear boundaries. I've learned that love doesn't mean unconditional sacrifice, and forgiveness doesn't equate to weakness. A true family forms only when everyone in it respects each other as independent individuals with their past's mistakes and capacity for change. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment and share your thoughts on boundaries and family ties. Don't forget to follow the channel to stay updated on authentic, emotional stories that bring meaningful life lessons, because sometimes just one story can give someone the courage to start anew.